What up, hockey family? Welcome to Trapped Under Ice, episode 1, and we're going to be talking about spring hockey. So, a number of things to bring to the table in spring hockey, and there's a lot of debate on this, whether it's worth it, whether it's not. Should the kids take a break? What is the development plan? Is it a good idea to take time away from the rink, or should you really commit and dig in and get as much ice time as possible? What about other sports? What are the pros and cons? So all of these things are important to evaluate and ask questions about as you move into the time for spring hockey, which basically runs from the end of your playoffs and provincials for the previous season just into summer. What are some other options if you don't want to play spring league to keep your skills up and get you ready for tryouts maybe the next season? So these are all things that we're going to cover. To jump right into it, there are a few things that we need to consider. So, is spring hockey worth your time? Well, it's really going to come down to the organization that you're with and that you're planning on doing spring hockey with. So, to put it all in perspective, we're talking about my organization that my stepdaughter Sasha is currently in. At the end of the season, we placed the offer in front of her. Did she want to continue with spring hockey? Now, to give you some background, Sasha played in the under-13 B rep level in a mixed league. So she saw the ice for 2 games, 1 to 2 practices a week, plus an under-13 development, plus a female development. So she was on the ice anywhere between 5 and 6 times a week. That's a pretty solid commitment. So fast forward, season comes to an end, and she comes into spring league, which is 2 games, 1 development, and a female development. So we went from 5 to 6 hours of ice time down to about 4 hours of ice time. Now, that's not a huge drop. We're talking about somewhere around 2/3 of what a regular season commitment looked like. So, that's still a fair amount of time taken away. Plus travel time, so on and so forth, to and from the rink. So, is it worth it? Well, I think another question you have to ask yourself is, how does the organization that you're with going to map this out and lay it out for you? So, is it going to be inter-organizational play, or is it just going to be inside your organization? Is there enough kids that are interested to bring to the table 2, 3, 4 teams, maybe in one age group, that can play against each other, keeping it fun, keeping it lighthearted, but keeping it somewhat competitive? These are all questions you have to ask. How much does it cost? What's the ice time like? What's the commitment level like? All these questions. So when asking the ultimate question of, is spring hockey worth it? There's a lot of pieces to that question that have to be answered. Not to mention the next one. How do you get the most out of it? So the biggest thing in hockey that is talked about over and over and over again is development. We've even started calling practices development ice times. And this is important, but can be a bit misleading. So, in my mind, development in hockey is a roadmap. It's a plan to work on the skills that are necessary for an individual and for a team, or for a line, or for the defense, or forwards, or for the goalie. There has to be a plan to that development in order to see it actually come to fruition. So, how do you get the most out of it? Well, you kind of have to look at the coaching that's going to be present during the time. You have to look at what the development plan is. What's the ice times going to look like? Is it majority games, or is it majority practice and development time? What is the overall goal of the spring league? Is it to develop the kids, or to just keep the rust off? Which is it? The pros and cons, and there are a lot of them. And this is something that, believe me, take it with a grain of salt what I'll bring forward on this, but we'll jump into those a little later. And then multi-sport. Other sports during the spring and summertime. And this one here is a hotbed and a red button topic, because people are truly on one side of this coin or the other. There's very few that are in the middle. So If you're looking for a yes/no to spring hockey within this video, you're not going to get it. I'll be straight up honest with you. There is no yes/no answer. All I'm going to do here is bring forward the questions that you need to ask yourself and the player has to ask themselves when making the decision of stepping into a spring hockey league. And I'll also bring forward a number of other options that are out there, maybe in your community or in a nearby community, or maybe there's a travel option that can come to the table to help develop your child properly. But we're going to jump right into the big ones. So, is spring hockey worth the time? Well, my stepdaughter Sasha spends a lot of time at the rink. Throughout the season. 6 ice times. Between 2 games, 2 practices, under 13 development and female development. That's a lot of time. Spring hockey in our organization brings us down to 4 for her. Right? 2 games, 1 development, and 1 female development. So each of these are between 50 minutes to an hour apiece, plus travel time, so on and so forth. So when you're asking, is it worth it? Here's a number of the questions you got to start asking yourself. First off, right out of the gates, time. Can you commit to the time that is necessary between travel time, pickups, drop-offs, getting them to the rink on time, and meeting all the requirements that are there so they truly get the most out of it? Because we know if you dabble and go to 1 game, maybe 1 development, you're towing the water. You're not actually looking to develop. You're just spending a little bit extra time. The other side of the coin is the financial commitment. How much is this going to cost? Right? Some organizations offer spring hockey at a much reduced rate. Some, luckily enough, the organization I'm with actually offers it for free. Makes the decision a hell of a lot easier when you don't have to shell out extra money for a spring league. So, and does the child want to do it? I think that's a big question as well. And you have to ask your son or daughter, do they want to do this? Is this something that they want to spend the next couple of weeks, maybe 2 months doing, being at the rink? Or do they want to take a break? We all know that if our child doesn't want to do something, they're not going to put 100% effort into it. Not going to happen. So you have to ask them, and ask them to be honest with you. Do you want to do this? How do you get the most out of it? So this is a 50-50 split. One side is yourself and the player. You have to ask them and ask yourself, are you ready to commit to this? Just like you did for the previous season, are you ready to commit the time, money, energy, effort, all of those things to the development of yourself in hockey? That's a huge question. The other side of the coin is, what does the development look like and the plan look like coming from the organization? Is there an actual development roadmap that they have out, or is this just to keep the rust off? And be honest with yourself when you ask that question, right? Ask a couple people in your community, well, what was spring hockey like last year? Who's running it? Who's coaching the development ice times? What's the plan? And with that, you'll get a bit of a better idea. To put it in perspective, Sasha's on the ice 4 times a week with spring hockey. 2 games, 1 development practice for under 13, and 1 female development practice. Now, right out of the gates, we have 2 games. Now, in the under 13, in our organization, there's enough players that were interested to roster 2 teams. And the way they broke this down was, so in the under 13 division, there's a AAA, a AA, an A, and a B team. Then you have the Metro teams. So they took the AAA and the AA, broke the teams apart, mixed them up, put them back together, and created 2 teams that were a bit evenly matched, and they play each other twice a week. The A and the B team did the exact same thing. They broke the teams apart, mixed them up, put them back together, created 2 teams that compete against each other twice a week. Now, that being said, they will adjust the team. So if one team blowing the other team out of the water 7-0, there is an adjustment where they'll shift players from one side to the other. So it's not that big of a deal. It does get a little boring playing the same players over and over and over again, and this is a complaint that I've heard not only from Sasha, but from other players and parents. But it is what it is, right? Not all kids are committed to putting in more time and so on and so forth, but there's been a good amount of kids that have decided to take part in this. The other side of it is the development. Now, this is when you really need to do a little research. So I'm a huge advocate that you get a lot of first-hand experience from games, but games are where you go to test your skill level that you learned in practice and really take those skills that you've honed and you've worked on and put them into action out on the ice. So practices are incredibly important because it allows you to focus on specific skill sets, traits, skills, talents, habits that will really help your game. The problem is when it's just running drills, it doesn't really do much because there's no plan. You're just out there running drills over and over and over again. So if you don't hit the drills that the child actually needs, you're not giving them the development that they want, or you may not be challenging them enough to keep them engaged, and you'll see the attendance at these practices start to drop. And I've seen this time and time again, that if the practice is not engaging, the kids don't really want to be there. Right? They don't feel that it's worth their time yet again. And then she has the female development practice, which is basically just turned into a third game. Right? They mix girls up from under 11 to under 15. They mix them into two teams and they cut them loose, which again is fine. So when asking Sasha, was this worth it? Well, it was a pretty easy question when she gets to play 3 games for every 1 practice. She's not a huge fan of practices. So it was easy, right? That was fine. So when asking that question, is spring hockey worth it? Again, you have to look at your organization and you have to look at the plan they have in place. So how do you get the most out of it? Well, speaking firsthand from being a coach, it takes a lot to put together a development plan for a single team, let alone 2 or 3 combined. You can't be all things to all people, and you can't specifically work on traits that 1/4 of the people on the ice need to work on. It's not worth the time. So you do have to create practice plans that commit to the masses, which is good and bad in its own right. So with that being said, there still should be some sort of a development, progression, and plan. And I do know that it is not just in the practices, but at the games. If you have coaches behind the bench and in the dressing rooms that are truly committed to the kids and their development, they'll have those conversations with them and tweak their gameplay in the moment, on the bench, between shifts. And that's truly, truly important. So what you want to do is ask these kinds of questions. Who's coaching? What's the development look like? What's the time commitment, the financial commitment, all these other things. Now, moving in to another side of things, which is the pros and cons. So, with this, we have to look at the 2 different sides. So, pros, additional ice time. Nothing wrong with that, right? I'm the biggest advocate for getting as much ice time as you can and being out on the ice as much as you can to work on the skills that are necessary, right? This is a great opportunity to continue to work on those skill sets that you need. Now, that being said, how is that additional ice time being utilized? So, a lot of kids are out there to have fun, which is great. That's fantastic. But they're not going to have a self-driven motivation to work on 1 or 2 skills. That's going to come down to the coaching and the practice plans. Now, this one's a little bit for the parents because I understand. Believe me, I do. Your lives are crazy. Between work, getting kids to school, dealing with homework, assignments, prepping meals, doing all these other things that cause our lives to go absolutely nuts and time to slip away. Keeping up to date in the hockey community is a lot for the parents too. That hour to hour and a half that they get to just sit down at the arena, maybe chat with a couple of friends, and have those conversations. It's a social time for them, and that's important as well. If parents, guys, if you enjoy being at the rink, it's more likely your kid will enjoy going there, right? It is important that you enjoy your time and not just yelling at your kid to skate harder or shoot harder or what have you, but just enjoy watching them and engaging with the other parents. It allows you to keep your finger on the pulse of what's going on in the hockey community, what's going on with other kids, what are the plans the parents have for their kids. And the rumor mill is always fun. The other side of it, you get to stay in shape. The kids get to stay in shape during the off season, and they get to keep their skills sharp. They may not be developing at the same rate as they were during the regular season, but at very least, they're not going to start to slip back too much. They can keep working on those skills, on their edge work, on their speed, endurance, their strength, their shot, things like that. And that's important, right? You don't want to start to backtrack. You want to keep moving forward. And one of the biggest things is they get to hang out with their friends. And that's important as well. You ask any kid, if they want to be a part of spring hockey, the very first thing that comes out of their mouth, I guarantee, will be, who's in? Which one of their friends are playing? Which one of their friends signed up? Who did? Who didn't? Who else is going to be there? That's important to them. So have the conversations with other parents on the team and in the organization. Find out who's in, right? With social media now, it's actually very easy. We were talking about spring hockey on the team that I coached last year about a month before the season actually was coming to a close. And we were able to walk up to Sasha and be like, here's almost a full roster of who you're going to be playing with during spring hockey. Made the decision a lot easier. And it is important that they get to continue to build these friendships and build these relationships, get to know the coaches, things like that. This is important. So please, I put that on the pro list for that reason, because it is important to the kids. Now, let's switch gears. So the cons. Too much focus on a single sport. This one's a hot button. So there are a lot of schools of thought on this, and I've looked over this online. I've talked to people at the arenas. I've spoken to coaches and things like that. And everybody has a different opinion. And it's never a gray area in the middle. It's either yes or no. That's it. And there are some major names in hockey that have outright spoken to this on one side of the coin or the other. Some have said, no, it's not worth it. Give the kids a break. There's no need for them to be at the rink that much. Give them a break. Let them do other things. And other ones that will sit back and tell you that the more time you commit to something, the better you can be at it and the faster you'll develop. That is true. To a point. So, as a coach, my goal and my focus is the development of my players. If they win, great. If they lose, they learn something. But development is key, right? As long as during the time I have them, I can take them to jump in their development during that time and become the best hockey player I can get them to be by the end of that season, that's what's important to me, and that's the win, in my eyes. If they win the championship at the end, or they squeak by and win 50% of the games, doesn't matter. As long as they learn something, they have fun, and they develop, That's the key. Now, that being said, if you're out there just playing scrub hockey and there's no development behind it, well, you're still playing and you're still learning and you're still developing your own personal skills, but you could do the same thing at pickup hockey, right? So, is there truly a benefit to those extra hours if those extra hours aren't being utilized properly? It's a hard question to answer. There are some kids, like I said, that are totally self-motivated, and they will go out there and they'll work on those skills that they know they need to work on. And that's great. The majority of kids in the age groups of under 13, under 15 aren't like that. They're just going to go out there and have fun. Show off a little bit. Maybe show that new move they have. That's about it. So, too much focus on a single sport. There are other sports out there that can definitely help you out, and we'll get into those a little later. Focused coaching. So, during Spring League, you don't normally get to spend time with just your team. The ice times are a little bit more cramped. If it's actually a development practice, there's more players on the ice, and you have to teach to the masses. You can't specifically work on specific skill sets, maybe like one-timers and things like that. And if you do, it's only for a short period of time. You can't really compile off the previous practice and be like, okay, we worked on this, and then we worked on this, so now we're going to put the two together and we're going to do this. And show the kids how all the pieces fit together. You don't really get that option that much in the Spring League hockey and development because you're not seeing the kids on a one-to-one basis nearly enough. So, again, it has to, your perception of Spring League hockey and the reality of Spring League hockey may be very different. They might be exactly the same depending on the organization you're with, but you have to ask the questions in order to get the answers. The next one is skill level, and I'll explain this one a little bit. So if you have an organization that has a high enough population in a certain age group that you can have 2 or 3 teams at different skill levels, great. That's fantastic. But if you're in an organization that the Spring League hockey is basically slamming all the kids together, and you have kids out there that are at the Metro level and the kids that are at the AAA level, that's going to cause a lot of friction. Nothing, and I repeat, nothing will push a kid out of hockey faster than being put on the ice with people that are skating circles around them. They just feel like they'll never be able to keep up, that they'll never be able to develop to that level. Right? They were just out there for fun, and we got this kid that thinks he's the next Connor McDavid coming down the ice. Right? It's no longer fun to them. Take the fun out of hockey. You'll take the kid out of hockey. And believe me, I've seen this happen. Right? So, adjust for the skill level. Ask the questions. What is the plan, and where will my child get slotted in the whole thing? Right? If they're with the same skill level that they were working with, or maybe a tier higher, that's great. That's fantastic. No problem. It gives them a goal to shoot for and challenges them. If they're in a Metro League and they're playing with players at a AAA level, I personally don't see that it's worth it, because it'll actually be more discouraging than it'll be helpful. Personal opinion, but keep it in mind. The last point on the con side of things is social growth and development. Now, given my education, this is kind of something that I feed into and really feel is important when we're thinking about kids. So, a lot of my kids' time now is screen time. They're on social media, they're watching YouTube, they're doing all these things. They're texting and not calling people, right? Like, Sasha would sooner text anybody than talk to them on the phone. Anybody. Doesn't matter who it is. So, that being said, it's this level of separation when you're talking about just general day-to-day communication and social skills. I think it's important that kids are in sport because it allows them to build those social skills and build the relationships and the friendships that are necessary. Build the relationships with coaches and things like that active listening. All these things are incredibly important. Asking questions and realizing that there are truly no stupid questions. You have to ask questions to learn. That's how things work. But if you leave them in that bubble, then you're not allowing them. Once they get comfortable in there, okay, they're all right, but that's where the growth ends. They need to move out of there and into other areas so they can continue to work on those social skills with different groups of kids. If you're in a hockey dressing room, everybody's there for the same reason, right? That gives you an in and gets you into the conversation. And by the time you've been locked into a dressing room or a bench with a group of kids for a season, yeah, you don't really have much choice but to get to know them. On the flip side, you take them out of that and you throw them into something else. Say it's music lessons or soccer, baseball, basketball, volleyball, dance, whatever it happens to be. It gives them the opportunity to challenge them once again on a social skill level and forces them to gain those social skills so they can continue to develop. And that's important. Keeping that in mind, you always need to challenge them. Take them out of their comfort zone a little bit, but let them know that it's safe. And that is a big thing for kids because kids will start to identify themselves as something. We all did it. If you think back long enough, everybody did this. I identified myself as a hockey player, as a jock. Right? Kids will identify themselves, I'm a hockey player, I'm a basketball player, I'm a gamer, right? I'm a bookworm, I'm a dancer, I'm this, I'm that, I'm a musician. That happens, right? I'm a guitarist. So we identify ourselves as something. The trick to the whole thing is not letting them place themselves into a bubble. You are not defined by your sport. You define the sport. That's the trick. Right? Hockey or soccer or baseball or whatever it is, yeah, it's a part of our lives and it's something we're passionate about, and that's important. That's great. But it doesn't define you 100% as the person that you are. Right? And when kids define themselves as, say, a hockey player, well, then they don't know how to interact with kids that aren't hockey players. So you see where it becomes a slippery slope. So teaching kids skills for interpersonal communication and social development is important. And sometimes it means taking them out of their comfort zone and placing them somewhere else. So, enough of a tangent on that. But that gives you an idea of some of the pros and some of the cons that you have to look into and the questions that you have to ask yourself, ask your kid, ask other people in the community to come to the decision whether it is or isn't worth it. And it's not an easy question to answer, and sometimes you just have to try it once, see what it's like, right? Who's going to be involved? What's the time commitment? What's the financial commitment? So on and so forth. So, with all of that being said, we'll run back down the list. And to put this all into perspective, like I said before, Sasha is in spring hockey, so obviously I'm not 100% against it. I would like to see more of a development in it, but that's just me. Again, my opinion, worth a grain of salt. So, I go back to the multi-sport conversation because this is the big one. Should your child do hockey for the majority of the year? Well, in all honesty, I didn't. I played a standard hockey season every year, from tots all the way up to midget and past, right, into major junior. So, with that being said, in the summertime, the spring and summer, I played soccer. Hell, I even played baseball for a couple of years. Didn't overly enjoy it, but it did work on my hand-eye coordination. And that's the trick, is every sport out there will offer different skill sets and challenges that can easily be transitioned back to hockey. So don't think just because you're not playing hockey, you're not developing skills that can work at hockey. Soccer was fantastic for footwork, endurance, burst power, speed, all of these things. Like basketball, lateral movement, like explosive power, hand-eye coordination, depth perception, all these things play in basketball. Volleyball, again, lateral movement, burst speed, things like that. And even racket sports are fantastic for hand-eye coordination. Right? Fantastic. And for burst power. All these things are great. So as long as they're doing something, right, being physically active in some way, shape, or form and expanding their skill sets, then there's not really room to complain. Because all of them will lead back to hockey if that is their ultimate goal. And that's important. Again, I truly feel that branching into other sports, you get to meet new people, you get to work on your social skills. All of that is great as well. So, to bring the whole idea around, Sasha will be part of spring hockey. She already is. She'll be doing that, but she'll also be playing soccer this summer during her off time. And that allows her to meet up with a group of kids that, again, she grew up playing soccer with, but she doesn't see them all year while she's in the hockey rink because she doesn't have time. So she gets to go out and spend the time on the field with more friends, which is really important. Now, I had mentioned other options that are out there as well. So look out in your community because there isn't just Spring League. There's also camps. Hockey camps run all summer long, and there are so many different varieties and options that are out there. Some of them will be right in your backyard. Some of them you're going to have to travel for. This year, luckily enough, we'll have the opportunity, given that the Atlantic bubble sets back into place, to travel to Prince Edward Island again so Sasha can attend her second year at Al Andrews Hockey Growth Programs. This is a fantastic opportunity for her. I went to these camps and I can't speak enough of them. But it's 6 days of intense hockey training. You're on the ice twice, if not 3 times a day, upwards of an hour and a half each time you touch the ice. There's classroom sessions, dryland sessions, flexibility and strength training, everything. And they teach leadership skills as well. This is a full rounded camp. Now, with all that being said, this camp is upwards of $500 for 6 days. So it is pricey. There are other camps that are $150, $200. It may run 1 or 2 nights a week for a month, maybe 2 months, that will work on specific things. Check in your community, talk to the people at the rink. You will get the answers you're looking for. Now, one of the biggest things when it comes down to spring hockey, regular hockey, camps, so on and so forth, is the financial commitment that is there. Talk to your organization. A lot of organizations in Canada offer options for funding for events like this. We're fortunate enough that through 50/50 ticket sales that we do all year long, Sasha gets a portion of each ticket is sold. A portion of the money gets put into a pot for her next year's registration, for hockey gear if we need to buy an upgraded helmet or shoulder pads or whatever we need, or hockey development camps. Anything that is hockey focused, we can submit a claim for and be reimbursed for it. So it makes the hit significantly easier, right? Because I don't think anybody listening to this is going to argue with me when I say hockey is an expensive sport. So you have to consider all of these things. Is it worth it? Is the financial commitment worth it? The time commitment worth it? Is your child going to see the development they need? Do they want to do it? And players, please, be honest with your parents when they ask you this. Be honest. Be straightforward. Be like, you know what? No, I'm good. I'm hockeyed out. I'd really like to take a break from the rink, and I want to do volleyball this summer, or I want to do like cross-country running, or you know what, I'd really like to learn how to play the piano. Whatever it is, be honest about what you want to do. Because you know as well as I do that if you don't want to be there, you're not going to give 100%, and it's not going to be worth it. So I think the biggest thing and the biggest takeaway from all of this is there is no yes-no answer. There's not. Is spring hockey worth it? Is it a good idea? Well, that depends on which angle you're looking at it from. But asking the questions that I brought here in this video, I think the answer will become a little bit more clear as to what you and the player want to do. And the commitment level that is necessary, and I keep saying it, time, energy, money, travel time, so on and so forth, all these things are important. But you want to make sure that your child is going to do this, that they're going to have fun, and they're going to develop. Those are the important things. If either of those two things aren't happening, your time might be better spent somewhere else. Right? Learning a new sport or learning a new skill. You have to truly ask yourself and ask your child, is this worth it? And again, I'll say this, players, be honest with your parents. Be truly honest. Because the way I've always looked at it and the way I try to make sure Sasha looks at it is, if you make a commitment to doing spring hockey or for a team or whatever it is, you have to see it through. And you have to give 100%. If you decide you want to do this, you have to give 100% to it till it's over. If you don't want to do it after that, fine. But you've made a commitment, you made a choice, see it through. So guys, that'll wrap up the first episode for Trapped Under Ice. I don't think I've answered your question 100% whether spring hockey is worth it or not in so many words, but I hope I've given you a couple of the questions and the tools that you can ask yourself and ask your players. Is this worth it? Should I do this? Do I take the time and the effort to make this happen and commit ourselves to the next month or two to be back at the rink and working at this again? That being said, I'll be here again next week with a new video. I'll be dropping a teaser off in the middle of the week here in regards to what the next episode will be about, but thank you very much for tuning in. Like and subscribe, obviously, share it around whenever you can. And remember, practice like you play.